FIFA president Gianni Infantino is threatening with a TV blackout for the Women's World Cup after the big European nations have been offering unacceptable numbers for the rights of the event. So, let's talk about it. Speaking on the event, FIFA president has come out and said that the offerings from countries like Britain, Spain, Italy, Germany, and France have been a slap in the face for what the event is really worth. He has revealed that the bids have ranged from 1 to 10 million US dollars, which he has compared for the range of 100 to 200 US million dollars that the same broadcasters bid and paid for the Men's World Cup. Now, up to date, we know that BBC and ITV from the UK have reportedly bid 9 million euros, whereas German broadcasters have bid around 5 to 6 million euros. Doing a little bit of math and looking into a little bit of these broadcasting bids that they paid for the Men's World Cup, that's about 6 to 7% of what they actually paid. The biggest problem here is that Infantino is reporting that the viewership numbers for the Women's World Cup range from about 50 to 60% of the men's. And what he is seeing is that the broadcasters are bidding 2 to 100 times less. Now, this is actually incorrect if we are to really compare the numbers of the Women's World Cup and the Men's World Cup. Looking at these figures here, the final is about 6.2%. The semi-final stages sit at a slightly higher, 8.4%, with the quarterfinals sitting on a 9.6%. All of these numbers are released by FIFA. This is an audience report that they file after each World Cup. So this is straight out of released FIFA numbers. For Infantino to come out and say that the viewership is around 50 to 60% compared to the men's is actually false and just blatantly incorrect information. Literally looking at the numbers that FIFA have released, it averages to around 8.5%. And if we are to compare that with the bidding numbers, that actually falls exactly between that range of the viewership that we see for the women's compared to the men's. Another piece of information is the terminology that has been used. Infantino constantly comes back to the idea that we cannot get the revenue we need without this investment. Now, revenue and investment are two terms that FIFA loves to capitalize on and be able to use in a manner that suits them best. It was discovered that the total revenue FIFA listed for the Women's World Cup to be sitting at 131 million was actually not the revenue, but rather the investment they put into the event. Now, this disparity and this lack of transparency in terms of what revenue means to them and what investment means to FIFA did cause a little bit of a debacle and did cause a little bit of distrust from the FIFA numbers that are being reported out to the media and the public, which is quite troubling. This makes it a lot harder to trust what FIFA is saying and what FIFA is reporting on these numbers when you've got simply and factually incorrect percentages being presented, and you've also got a history of numbers and revenue and investment terminology being screwed around the Women's World Cup. That is also not a great track record, and it's kind of difficult to see what FIFA is expecting and what they actually are getting. I also think it's massively and quite irrelevant to even mention and compare the women's bids in the Women's World Cup to the Men's World Cup. The Men's World Cup ran in December, the Women's World Cup is running in the summer. The Men's World Cup ran in Qatar, in a Middle Eastern country, whereas the Women's World Cup is running in New Zealand and Australia, a completely different continent. Different time of the year, you've got different nations participating, you've also got different continents that this is being hosted on. This Women's World Cup is the first one that is including 32 nations, so it's a completely different setup to what we've seen before, and the Men's World Cup obviously was nothing different to what we had seen before in terms of the complete setup that was showcased. FIFA had an emphasis on, you know what, we understand that the time difference might be a little bit difficult, but Qatar also had a time difference, but I actually think that's also quite incorrect. The majority of the games that took place in Qatar were actually presented prime time in these European nations, which is not the case this time around. For example, you've got a very, very exciting matchup between the United States and the Netherlands happening at 3 a.m. in the majority of these European nations. Well, I'd assume a lot of Netherlands fans are going to wake up to watch that game. Your regular neutral or your regular fan of the game is not going to wake up at 3 a.m. on a Thursday to watch that. It's simply poor scheduling from FIFA, and it's simply absurd to expect that these nations are actually, going to offer these ludicrous numbers that you're asking for when these games that should be on prime time are actually on at 3 a.m. It doesn't make sense to have that and expect something completely different. Had that actually been scheduled a little bit better and had that actually been on prime time, you would see better numbers coming in. So again, comparing the time zone that a lot of these games are happening with the men's time zone is irrelevant because the scheduling is different. It's poorer, and these European nations are not getting the prime time games that they should be getting. I highly doubt that the BBC and ITV offering 8 million euros is undervaluing the event, considering there's a lot of games that are not going to be on prime time, are not going to bring in the numbers that you actually would want to see. And this isn't a foreign idea. I mean, if you look back at the 2002 Men's World Cup, which took place in Japan and Korea, the viewership numbers in a lot of these European countries were quite disappointing. Again, because some of these games were not on prime time, and some of these games are not gonna, get the neutral waking up at 4 a.m. midweek, taking a day off work. It's simply just not possible, and it won't happen, and you can't expect fans to do that. Worst, you simply can't threaten and punish broadcasters for a scheduling mistake that you haven't addressed yourself. You cannot simply blame it on a time zone or just the time difference between New Zealand, Australia, and the majority of the other countries. A lot of individuals and fans even sided with FIFA and said, you know what, I think maybe hosting this event in New Zealand and Australia was a bad idea, which is false. You can't expect to just grow the game in European countries or CONCACAF countries. You have to take these events elsewhere to grow the game there. New Zealand and Australia have been nothing but incredible hosts so far in terms of the investment, in terms of the expectations, in terms of preparing the event to best of their abilities. And I'm not sure if FIFA has considered this to the bigger lengths, but when you are threatening with this TV blackout, it affects New Zealand and Australia a lot more than they probably realize. You can't forget that the sporting industry, the ministries, the government, they're putting a lot of money into that, and hopefully they're able to generate a movement. They're able to generate that money. And with FIFA threatening this huge threat and that could possibly really hinder how this event does is not good. And I would possibly even propose that in the future, certain countries might want to think twice or might shy away from wanting to host a World Cup or wanting to work with FIFA when you've got threats going around like that few months before the World Cup kicks off. I also want to take the chance to remind you that FIFA is a non-for-profit body that is supposed to empower and govern the world of football. That is literally their job. Non-profit, power and govern the world of football. Another reminder is that FIFA is reportedly currently sitting on $4 billion of reserve cash. $4 billion of reserve money. So imagine a really, really messed up world and almost a world that Infantino's trying to portray. Not a single dime is put in, not a single proper bid is put in. FIFA could still afford to broadcast and sell these rights to the majority of these European countries that they're going after right now. Again, $4 billion, they're a non-profit body that is supposed to power and govern and continue to grow the world of football. Just want to leave that there for you. This is also not to take away from a lot of countries that have already bought these rights. You've got Norway, who secured a right. Most in the majority of Nordic countries already have sealed rights. TSN and Canada have already got rights. Fox and multiple other broadcasters in the US have got rights. So this issue mostly between FIFA and the broadcasters is actually in those European countries. But again, it goes back to prime time, and it's simply not going to hit prime time in the European countries. Certain countries, and I know certainly the UK, have some laws that they need to show these international tournaments like this. Now, I couldn't find too much about what FIFA and the whole legality behind this would look like, but the TV blackout does include the fact that FIFA Plus would just not show these games across the world. So there is a very high risk, or I mean, I don't know what could happen, but there is a chance or a slight risk that not even FIFA Plus would carry these games. And so there's certain countries that will not be able to legally show these games. I'm sure there's illegal streams that are going to be around, but legally, there's some countries that would literally not have any streams going on for this. And there could be a different approach to this in terms of they don't threaten, they actually show these games on FIFA Plus, and maybe FIFA actually takes this opportunity to show and prove the broadcasters wrong. FIFA would be able to track the viewership numbers that go into FIFA Plus. And so, for example, Italy, according to FIFA, is bidding really, really low for these rights. If the FIFA Plus viewership numbers in Italy prove to be a lot higher than expected and actually hit what FIFA's expecting, then for FIFA, this could prove something. And for FIFA, they're able to have a better argument with Italy's broadcasters rather than just completely saying, actually, we're going to have a TV blackout and nobody's going to be able to see it. I don't think that's a very progressive conversation to be having right now. If anything, that's actually taking backward steps to an event that could be very sport changing. This is also by no means me suggesting that the broadcasters should not offer exactly what this event deserves, but from the numbers and comparing the men's World Cup and the women's World Cup viewership and bid numbers, because that's what FIFA wants it to be. That's the conversation FIFA wants to lead, is this comparison, which I've emphasized before. I don't think that should be the conversation. But if that is the conversation that we are to stick with, the broadcasters are actually kind of offering exactly what the numbers show. So this is not really great evidence for FIFA. So I'm not undervaluing what this event deserves, and I'm not undervaluing what these rights should be valued for, but I don't think FIFA should be threatening, and I don't think this is a progressive conversation to be had. But ultimately, FIFA has to find a common ground between the broadcasters and themselves. Otherwise, this could be quite damaging for the sport. It could be quite damaging for the reputation that's already not a very great reputation, and it could be damaging for those broadcasters that might realize they actually had a pretty big mistake not doing what they needed to do, which is possibly offer a little bit higher. So this is quite an interesting conversation that, you know, not one side is better than the other, not one side is more right than the other. There's definitely multiple sides and multiple conversations to be had on how this should be handled and how this should play out and how will this play out. I'd love to hear your opinions on this. Do you think FIFA is actually quite honest with what they want and what they think this event deserves? In their opinion, it's not looking right, and the numbers that they are pointing out are the right and accurate numbers? Do you think there's a little bit of dishonesty going on, considering the numbers that are actually literally published by them in terms of viewership? I want to hear your opinions, and now just share it all. Let's get a good conversation going in the comments below. As always, to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. All of these episodes are also free and available on Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts. I'll see you later.